You know that bit just before you need to push, where the contractions reach a level of pain so exquisite that you think you would rather die, you'd almost welcome it. And then just when it gets to that point, the pain releases its grip. And that's what he did. My body was thrashing, but my mind was calm. I'm going to die now, and that's okay. And then suddenly, he removed his hand from around my throat. My head shot up from the bottom of the bathtub where he pinned me, and the first breath was glorious. As he stalked from the bathroom, my second breath was accompanied by the depressing thought that I'd have to face all of this again tomorrow. We met in sixth form, and we had a lovely summer romance. He was kind and funny. He was very popular. He was head boy at the school. Quite a catch, my parents had said. The problems began when we went to different universities, the choice having been made months before we met. From the very first night I was there, he was on the phone asking me what I was wearing, where I was going out that night, and with whom. The first punch came a few weeks later. I'd annoyed him by having a cigarette in a pub. "You might die," he said, "and then I will be all on my own." At nearly 6'4", he was a big man. And the punch, when it came, threw me so hard against the wardrobe behind me that the door came off. As I hunched on the floor, trying to cope with the pain, it took me a while to realise that he was on his knees beside me, weeping and begging for my forgiveness. And so it began. After a year of misery and fear, my friends took matters into their own hands, and they went to the security at the campus, and he was banned from the campus. But he defied this. So security went to the police, and they had a word. And then like that, I was free. I couldn't believe it. I was free of him, and suddenly it was like my whole life opened up. There was possibility of joy and fun and a whole future. I can't tell you how amazing it felt. Until I realised I was pregnant. Neither set of parents wanted to know, and although I would fight to the death for another woman's right to an abortion, my Irish Catholic upbringing meant it just wasn't an option for me. I was still 18 and I had no support, so I did the only thing I thought I could. I went back to him. To give him his due, he got a job as a waiter in the evening to put a roof over our heads, and the rapes and beatings stopped once the bump began to show. Not because of how he felt about the pregnancy, but because he usually hurt me in places that no one could see. And I told him that I would need to start having antenatal checks, and he was worried that he'd get into trouble. I played along with his plans for our future. I let him think that we were going to keep the baby. But there was no way in hell I was going to let my baby be the next punch bag. So when I went into labour, I said to the nurses that I didn't want him there, and that I was going to have to give the child up for adoption. After 17 hours, Stella was born. She was beautiful, and they took her immediately. And I didn't hold her because I knew that if I did, I would never let go. This remains the most difficult and painful thing I've ever had to do in my life, but I've never regretted it. It took me 7 more years to free myself from that man, and a lot longer to free myself from the creeping fear that he planted in me. I just couldn't trust anybody. I used to flinch when people came too close, and I never felt safe anywhere. My biggest problem was that I feared and hated men. All men. Any man could attack me as far as I saw it. And so I would usually attack first, whether I'd be mean or sometimes I'd just full out scream. Now, most of my bosses at work at this time were male, and so this didn't do my career much good. I gained a reputation for being argumentative and aggressively feminist, one of them called me. I also had crippling anxiety, because when someone you love that much betrays you to that degree, you just think anything could happen, and you're constantly watching out for it. So about 15 years ago, I got to the point where I thought, I just can't do this anymore. I can't live being this afraid. And so I started my journey from fear to freedom. It was a long, hard road. But as Winston Churchill said about his depression, when you're going through hell, keep going. And I did. So how did I get from fear to freedom? What steps did I take? Well, I spent years in therapy, and that was fantastically helpful to allow me to process what had happened in the past and become a survivor of abuse rather than a victim. And then I tried to move on. But my problem was, I was still afraid. I realised that I still believed that all men were capable of violence. And that's where the fear came from. And while I believed that about men, I was never going to have happy relationships, and the fear would always be there. The turning point for me came a few years later, when I discovered something called, it's a funny name, neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically a really powerful system for changing beliefs in your mind. And I thought, I'm going to give this a go, because if I can change my beliefs about men, then the fear, I'll be free from it, finally. So after about 3 months of working with NLP, as it's called, I noticed some changes. I stopped flinching when people moved near to me. And I stopped spending hours looking in the mirror each morning, wondering if the outfit I picked was somehow going to provoke an attack. Another couple of months, and I realised I was actually enjoying talking to men. I wasn't having to carefully monitor the tone of their voice and be hyper-vigilant about the moves they were making. It's absolutely fantastic to be that free. And the more my belief changed about men, the more the fear melted away. So today, I'm completely free of fear in all areas of my life. Not just with men. I used to shuffle down the street in baggy clothes, constantly scanning for danger. Now, I strut down the street confidently and wear what I like. And it's wonderful to be able to laugh. And it's wonderful to be able to trust people again. It's wonderful for me to be able to love men and count them as friends. It's absolutely been life-changing for me. So I'm sure my story of surviving domestic abuse resonates. It's similar to many people's. I just thought that creeping fear was a scar that I was going to have to bear for the rest of my life. It never occurred to me that I could become free of it completely. I'm sure my story of fear resonates with many people in this room. But I'm just an average woman, and I found a way to be free of the fear. And now I want that for everybody who is affected by domestic abuse, all of us. So that's what I now do for a living. I've become a master practitioner of NLP, and I'm a master coach. And I work with people. I work with people who want to remove fear from their lives, to help them get free of it. And I work with people who have stress and anxiety, and also people who, like me, have survived trauma and abuse. Helping them understand that rather than just managing this fear for the rest of their lives, they can be free of it completely. And just to end on a really positive note, I've got a picture of another woman here who was also affected by domestic abuse. She was affected by domestic abuse in her early life. I met this woman for the first time in 2008, and she's amazing, and we've been in each other's lives ever since. This is Stella, the baby I had to give up. Life has brought her back to me, so that's my happy beginning. Okay, thank you very much.